Okay, so this morning I'm going to be talking about a number of things, but let me do a review to bring you up to today. On the 6th of January, this is the first Sunday that we talked for the new year, I talked about spiritual fire and initiation. Remember that? And in that talk, we discussed how important the head center and the heart center are during initiations and how important they are relating to spiritual fire. I also talked about pressure and tension and how the wounds of the heart and also the wounds of the head center influence us as we go through taking initiations of consciousness. And because I know there are new people on the on the webinar this morning that are not familiar with these thoughts, I do invite you to ask questions either today or to send me questions by email and I can elaborate. But briefly, initiation is all that we can imagine it is. It's a graduation. But in the spiritual life, spiritual teachings, initiation is like the culmination of many, many years or many, many incarnations of striving. And then once we take an initiation, we receive a charge of powerful, beautiful, spiritual, fiery energy, so that we take that energy with us into the next incarnation, next series of initiations, which usually will last, depending on the intensity of our striving, one incarnation or 1,000 incarnations. There are basically 9 initiations that we take as a human being. 4 are our primary concern. We then take sub-initiations of the great initiations 1, great initiation 2, great initiation 3, and great initiation 4. So in between these 4 great initiations, we have sub-initiations. And these initiations are really, really important because it's like plugging our soul into this great source of power and beauty and energy that will electrify us in such a way that as we come back into our next life and continue to experience this life, that we can be more of what the purpose of our life was designed to be. As we take an initiation, our consciousness begins to expand, little bit by little bit by little bit. And this expansion then affects the centers in our body. So in the case that I was talking about, January 6th, the more wounds that we have in our heart and in our mind, the more difficult it is to take the steps that lead us to these different initiations. But the beautiful part of the fire is that fire purifies. So even though we undergo difficulties, and these difficulties seem to magnify if we have a poor self-image, or that we find ourselves not so loving, or we find ourselves with addictions and issues in our life that are so controlling over us, that they're painful to look at. But the beautiful thing is these spiritual fires, as we undergo transformation and sublimation, begins to purify and cleanse all of these difficulties from our life. Now, the second talk I gave was January 13th. It was titled The Fusion of Spiritual Fire. That was last week. And this is when we talked about how the higher ethers come in and change the lower ethers, the cosmic ethers versus the lower ethers, and how this exchange of energy is also involved with the 4 initiations of consciousness. Now, some of us know that you can take all 3 initiations in one lifetime. It's not common. I can't even imagine. When we look at our life right now and all the challenges and obstacles and how hard we are working at becoming somebody, and how challenging that is, imagine taking 3 of these great initiations and all the sub-initiations in one life. So don't wish for that. I don't wish for that. I just wish to be better, to be on this path of consciousness expansion so that I can help humanity in a better way, and we can help the planet and the planetary guide take its initiation, its next initiation of consciousness. So today I'm going to be talking about the internal fires, which we talked about the first Sunday, January 6th. I'm also going to be talking about rays, adding rays to it today, R-A-Y-S. There are 7 rays. Rays, to best understand rays, they are energy that come from space and penetrate through all the spheres of space. Some rays are incarnations, some rays are not. We are Ray 2 solar system, for example, which means we are a solar system of love and compassion. That the key note for this second solar system is compassion, which is the great second ray. So I can't go into all the cosmology of the rays today because we only have about 30 to 35 minutes to bring in about 10 years of conversation. So this is a real condensed talk this morning. But there are books you can read about it. There are questions you can ask me that I'd be glad to try to answer, and direct you to different books you can read about it. So one thing I do want to add before I really get into the talk here is that we have what we call focus groups in the White Mountain group that was initiated last year during our annual Living Ethics Conference. And one of the focus groups continues to be together on the rays, esoteric astrology and the rays. So if you are on the webinar this morning, let your ears listen real carefully, because this is new information of how the rays relate to initiations. Okay, because there are particular rays, like there is a ray 7, just giving you a little sneak peek here, that the ray 7 is a ray that must be attracted. The substance of this energy of ray 7 must be drawn into the substance of your life if you're going to take the first initiation. And I've listed the virtues up there of ray 7, because virtues and the rays must work together. When we practice the virtues of a particular ray, then we call in the substance and energy of that ray that begins to push us along the way up the mountain to the top of the mountain, so we can finally and eventually take this first initiation. But before we get into the rays, I want to kind of recap and talk about fires. So we've learned over the last couple of Sundays that with the physical body there are 2 fires, right? Which really is one, but we separate it so we can better understand. So do you remember what that first fire was called? Anybody? No. No. What? Oh, you're close. Yes, that's part of it. The latent heat is one of those fires, but the first one, the most important one, is the vital internalizing fires. And that's resourced at the base of the spine. Okay, then the latent heat. Now that latent heat is part of every single cell in our body. So what this means is, as we begin to strive on this path of initiation of consciousness, and we practice the virtues related, in this case, to the first initiation, then these fires go into, how can I say this, begin to burn in the furnace being our chalice, the lotus. So it's like there's a revving up. You're turning on, this knob that's going to bring in more heat to intensify the flame, internalizing, vitalizing fire. And see, this is when we begin to activate this fire, is when purification automatically takes place. Our challenge is to keep our life in balance so that we practice these virtues that will automatically begin to eliminate all these obstacles and wounds in our heart center and head center and so forth. Now, these two fires are also called fire by friction. Now, I'm just bringing that in because some of you have studied in the past about the three major fires. So this is the first major fire. It's called fire by friction, which is a beautiful phrase because we know what friction means. The second major fire is called the solar fire, which is also known as the fire of the mind, right? Okay. Then we have the third major fire, which is electric fire, which is also known as the fire of the spirit. It's also, this electric fire is understood as and called the flame or the self, the capital S self. It's a great being of which we are and trying to become. And becoming ourselves, this is the capital S self. Okay, are you with me? Sylvia? Okay. You look uncomfortable.
I am physically.
Okay. When the internal fires, those internal vitalizing fires, and the latent heat that's part of every cell of our body, blend with the solar fire, what's going to happen? Finally, our personality, our true personality, emerges. We're no longer someone today, somebody different tomorrow, somebody else 3 days from now. We're no longer imitating this person and that person or this thing or that thing. Or we now have a beautiful, integrated, strong personality that is aligned more with this chalice that everybody has. And we increase our sense of self when these internal fires fuse with the solar fire. Now, these fires start blending with the fire of spirit. So we have, I'm going to recap this. We have the internal fires fusing with the solar fire, right? These fires begin to fuse together and blend with the fire of the spirit while we are preparing to take this first initiation. And what happens is that the seventh ray, the fire of the seventh ray, is attracted and comes into our whole being, our whole human constitution. So this is why I have this beautiful diagram, which those of you who are here can't really see, but if you were on the web and on an iPad, you could make that picture big or small, or you can download it. And anyway, this up here represents the different colors and the petals of our chalice. And as these fires begin to fuse and blend together, they are actually, it's like we're cooking our human soul in the furnace of this chalice. Isn't that exciting? Whew, boy, okay. It's exciting. Take my word for it, okay? So at this point, now I want to bring in the fact that these rays are related to initiation. So for the first initiation, we have the 7th ray. So the 7th ray corresponds with the first initiation. The second initiation, and this morning I'm talking about just the 4. The second initiation corresponds with the 6th ray. The third initiation corresponds with the 5th ray. And the 4th initiation corresponds with the 4th ray. Now the fusion of these 4 fires, the latent, active, solar, and electric, with the fire of the 7th ray enables us to take the first initiation. Who would know? Who would know? This is why I love these teachings so much. We know. Now we understand. Now we understand as if we have this passionate desire to be somebody, to do something, to help others, we've already activated these fires that our human soul is now being pumped up with in the chalice of our being, which is beginning to purify all of these many, many past incarnations in which we didn't do anything except cause trouble. So we want to take these initiations so that our next life and next life and next life will be increasingly more beautiful and more powerful and more substantial. What happens with the blending and fusing of these fires is that we then, it takes place on a spiral, on a spiraling manner, or in a spiraling manner, and the whole process of fusion takes place all the way up through the 9th initiation. On each spiral, different rays meet and blend and then expand our consciousness. So at this point, we can identify ourselves, which is kind of nice to do, rather than using our Social Security number in this country to identify ourselves. Now we can identify ourselves as an initiate, which means that we are taking more mastery over our life. So this is why I did this meditation this morning, to gain a better self-image. What's interesting to me is at the 9th initiation, only one flame remains. The flame of this self. Isn't that beautiful? It's so beautiful. As these initiations proceed, and this is how to explain, Beverly was kind of frowning, she didn't understand it. What this means is that, if we're going to have one flame, how does that happen? There's a blending of all these flames. They fuse together, but some of these flames are dropping out. We no longer, for example, need the fire by friction or those internal fires. So these fires, some of them begin to fade out. The internal fire, the fire of the physical body, fade out and are replaced by the solar fire, which is the fire of the mind. See how that works? Eventually, at the 4th initiation, the electric fire replaces the solar fire. The fusion of the fire of the ray and the fire of the atoms of the vehicles take place within the furnace of the 12-petaled lotus during the first 4 initiations. In the subsequent initiations, this fusion is carried on in the spiritual triad, which I don't have a diagram of here this morning. Okay? Okay. Now, for the more practical side. Okay, so that was the introduction. To take the first initiation, we must strive to develop the virtues of the seventh ray. It is the virtues that help the fires to progress in right proportion and enable the vehicles to sustain the fire without damage. This is really important. So what it means, if we're trying to activate this fire and we're not practicing the virtues, making them part of our life, then we're going to do damage to our physical etheric body. This is why we are told, for example, if you're on this path of initiation, don't chant for hours on end. When you take and engage in meditation, start at 5 minutes a day. Okay, now these are the virtues of the seventh ray. Realization of unity. This means we're going to begin to practice the realization of unity. Wide-mindedness as opposed to narrow-mindedness. Wide-mindedness. When somebody talks to you about an idea or a concept, don't say, but I thought that. See, that's narrow-mindedness. Wide-mindedness is, oh, wow, let me consider this. Let me think about this. Let me bring this into my consciousness and think about it, and it may expand us. This help our thinking to expand. So that's called wide-mindedness. Tolerance, we understand. Humility, gentleness, and love. These are all the virtues of the seventh ray. So if you want to take the initiation of the first, then these are the virtues that you want to practice. Realization of unity, wide-mindedness, tolerance, humility, gentleness, and love. I just love gentle, the word gentleness. It's so beautiful in a world that's so not gentle. To be gentle, wow, it's beautiful. As we develop these virtues, this is what happens. It's so scientific and it's so perfect and it's so beautiful, is that we begin to generate electricity, which is the spirit of the seventh ray. We generate electricity, which is the spirit, which enables us to take this first initiation. So increasing fire purifies. This increasing fire purifies. It builds the proper centers and reveals new levels of consciousness. So now I've introduced another word, centers. And I have only 10 minutes left, so I have to step this up a bit. What are the proper centers for the seventh ray? Alongside people who are taking the first initiation, it is the sacral center that is going to be activated. So what happens is that the electricity of the seventh ray is first accumulated in the sacral center, and then, stay with me with this, then it begins to travel up the etheric spine to the sacral center in the head. So it's going to activate different centers. These are pictures of the centers, which I can't really get into because of lack of time today, but you can use your creative imagination to understand it. So as the sacral center is activated by the electric fire of the spirit, the seventh ray activates the sacral center. And as we continue to develop these virtues, I've got to say this. I'm going to interrupt myself here about these virtues. There are many other virtues related to the seventh ray, but not at this level. These are what's called virtues to be acquired. So if you've studied virtues, you know there are basic virtues, then there are vices, and then there are virtues to be acquired. These are the virtues you want to acquire to take the first initiation, to draw in the fire of the seventh ray, and then to activate that sacral center that will eventually take that fire energy up into the sacral center in the head. Okay? Okay. The second initiation. To pass the second initiation, we must generate the electricity of the what ray? Sixth ray, absolutely. This electrical fire is accumulated in what center? Solar plexus, absolutely. And then it is lifted to the corresponding center in the head. As we engage in practicing, first of all, refining our emotions through acquiring the virtues related to these advanced virtues related to the sixth ray, which are to develop and acquire deeper love, compassion, the unselfishness, and right relationship. Now, in a few weeks, I'm going to be talking about right relationship. The center, I said, involved is the solar plexus, which now must be protected from violent emotional attacks. Wow, there's so much I could share with you, and I'm just so limited by time, but I can say this much. It's a Gemini talking. The we word, Geminis love the we word, okay, I won't get into it. How do you protect yourself from violent emotional attacks? Being around people who are gentle, who are refined. They can be powerful people, but they're no longer coarse. When you are working as an initiate to take this second initiation, you want to put yourself in a refined environment. If you are continuously exposed to a tumultuous environment, it will damage you. It will hurt your emotional body. The accumulating fires of this sixth ray also are going to create temporary difficulties in the corresponding centers. And I'm not going to get into that, just know it. Okay, until the fires find a way toward their higher correspondences in the head center. So, do yourself a favor. If you know you've taken the first initiation, or you have a sense that you have because you have acquired those virtues of realization of unity and tolerance and gentleness and love. Okay, now what you want to do is to create a lifestyle that is conducive to acquiring these virtues of the second initiation, to acquire deeper love. To acquire deeper love, you want to establish some steps of how are you going to do that? Because it must be real. It's got to come from your heart. You can't pretend. You're no longer an actor, on the stage of life. Now you're being real. So how are you going to develop a deeper love? This is not a social love. It's not a superficial. It is actually a deep love, which means you are going to be so increasingly more sensitive than a lot of people are in the world today. Compassion, unselfishness, and right relationships. So, as you are developing these virtues to be acquired, and you know you're going to have some difficulties in these corresponding centers, don't worry. As the song says, don't worry, be happy, because the difficulties are melting away. See, they are being purified while you are engaged in service to others. Applicants for the second initiation must try to sublimate or refine his or her emotions, live altruistically, and polarize him or herself toward a cooperative life. This is how we can generate the energy of the sixth ray. So you must strive to stand and function as a cause now instead of an effect. Your striving, it is your striving that evokes and brings in the fire of the sixth ray. Now the sixth ray is called, it has a name, it is called the ray of idealism and devotion. So during our life or chain of lives, we generate this fire, and as we express actions of intense devotion and abstract idealism. So if you hear people say, "Oh, you are such an idealist, yay!" You know you're striving to acquire the virtues of this second initiation. The third initiation needs one to develop the fire of the fifth ray. You see how these rays are now coming into actualization and expression in various parts of your personality and soul life. The virtues to be acquired for the third initiation that are related to the fifth ray, I have on the board here, it's reverence, devotion, sympathy, love, and wide-mindedness. Now, if you're familiar with some of those other rays of ray 5, you can say, wow, I had no idea. Because ray 5 is so scientific in their thinking. This is so different. These are the advanced rays, or advanced virtues that go with the ray 5. So if you are striving to take this third initiation, these are the rays: reverence, devotion, sympathy, love, wide-mindedness. Now, a lot of these virtues seem to be similar, but they're on higher frequencies, higher resonance, higher and greater substance forms as you begin to acquire these particular virtues. You may wonder, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. Aren't these rays similar to some of the others, or these virtues similar to some of the others? Well, yes, okay. There are always similarities, but remember that in progressive initiations, the same virtues have a wider range of relationship, and they operate on the higher planes, okay? As a person advances on the path of initiation, he or she not only develops new virtues, but expands and uses them more effectively on higher spirals. That we have developed in previous initiations. So we were told that in each initiation, the initiate is tested for the virtues that you formerly acquired. We're always tested. So just when we think, by Jove, I've got it, know that a test is coming right down the path to see if you really do have it. Then we pass on these virtues to their higher correspondences. We know, for example, people usually do not act by themselves. They are pulled or pushed or forced to do things. Most people act under the influence of the will of others. That's just the way it is. Many act under the influence of their own glamours and illusions and post-hypnotic suggestions. Whatever the case is, though, whatever the case is, the applicant for the third initiation is going to be himself. It's going to be himself. No longer under the influence of post-hypnotic suggestions or glamours or illusions or under the will of someone else. You are free. You have freed yourself from various influences, and now you're acting by your own free will, which is the will of your solar angel, the will of your inner guide, the will of your ashram, the will of your master, and so forth. At this initiation, illusions are attacked consciously to free the sphere of the mind from any pollution. This is the third initiation. The center that's involved in this initiation is the ajna center, through which the generated fire is used. I'm not going to be able to finish this. We're almost out of time. I'm so sorry. To be continued. It's all right. It's like, you know, how many of us are going to take the fourth initiation this life? If you are going to take it, you already know. You know what is in store for you. But if you're on the webinar, you can hopefully see the virtues of the Ray 4 for the fourth initiation, and I will give them to you right now just in case you can't see them. Serenity and confidence, self-control, purity, unselfishness, accuracy, mental and moral balance. This has to do with the fourth initiation and the Ray 4. Okay. And let me say this, just a little bit. Okay. Okay. As these fires, the first, second, and third initiation, begin to fuse together, you know, the internal fires, the latent fires, the solar fires, the electric fires. With that first initiation, kind of recapping here, the fires of the Ray 7 awaken the knowledge petals. So we're going back into the lotus here, also known as the chalice, because certain petals are called the knowledge petals. So this seventh ray awakens the knowledge petal. With the second initiation, the love petals begin to unfold, which is the will to cause. That's why I said when you take the second initiation, you become a cause and not effect. Remember that? And with that first initiation is the will to express. Now you're beginning to express that true self. And the third initiation, the petals of sacrifice receive the fire of energy for the will to act. Okay, and that's it.